So the Chiefs have some pretty tough decisions to make here soon. For starters, who's going to play left guard? Well, Andy Reid gave an answer today about a couple potential possibilities, but fans are not very happy about that one. Then there's a couple players whose contracts are nearly up, with one of them being a very crucial piece, but the team has not liked to pay for that position over the years. And that's not even to mention the draft taking place this week and the Chiefs really needing to hit on a few of those picks. It's safe to say there's a lot to discuss, so let's talk about it. But first, how about those? Alright, first up, Phase 1 of OTAs officially started today for a bunch of NFL teams around the league, including the Kansas City Chiefs. Any team that had a new head coach, like the Raiders with Pete Carroll, for example, got a 2-week head start. But for any other team with no changes at head coach, today is the day. Phase 1 is limited to meetings, strength and conditioning, and rehab, with really the players that'll actually be at Arrowhead being the ones who either live in Kansas City and just want to work out there, or need to actually rehab from an injury with the training staff. Everyone else is free to kind of work out wherever, with Mahomes and most of the skilled position players training together in Texas for what I believe is the third year in a row. More on that in a bit. Phase 1 is essentially a voluntary ramp-up period for players to get ready for Phase 2. Phase 2 allows for on-field workouts, individual or group drills, and the offense and defense can line up against each other to go through plays at a walkthrough pace. Regardless, no contact is allowed, even for Phase 3, when teams are allowed to run drills like 7-on-7, 9-on-7, and 11-on-11. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, if Phase 1 is limited to just meetings, strength and conditioning, and rehab, how is Mahomes out there in Texas working out with other quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs on top of that? Well, there's no coaches there. They are going to meet with coaches virtually during whatever meetings are actually allowed by the NFL, but the workouts and training is largely headed up by Patrick Mahomes himself, though I'm sure his trainer, Bobby Stroop, will be working in the mix as well regarding workouts. But this gives the quarterbacks time to build rapport with people they will be throwing the ball or handing it off to during the season, obviously if they make the roster. This allows Patrick to explain his thought process on routes, as they are called by the coaches, but how he expects them to adjust based off of coverages and how he might audible things pre-snap. A big piece of this, the guys hanging out together and working out together right now in Texas, is the rapport they build off the field as well, with many saying over the years this is some of the best moments they have. Lunch, meals, hanging out, and getting to know the guys you'll likely be working very closely with for the entirety of the 2025 NFL season. All right, real quick, I want to shout out a couple ways you can support the channel. You can get some HBTC coffee of Benchwarmer Brew. This has got origin notes of Mexico and Ethiopia, a smooth medium roast, and it is one of the most popular blends of the lineup. Then you can also snag some HBTC merch. We've got Dad Bod Season, X Factor in honor of Dante Hall, mixed with Xavier Worthy, of course, and much more. Links to both the coffee and merch are in the description down below. The fact that the coaches have trust in Mahomes to kind of head this up the last few years just points to the truth of the situation. Mahomes is no longer the young, wild gunslinger running around like a madman, but he's a savvy, trusted veteran, one of the best players in the entire NFL, and a definite leader of the team. Now, Andy Reid and Trent McDuffie spoke with the media today. More on McDuffie here soon, but Andy Reid shared that Mahomes leads things now down in Texas, and honestly, it's a bit easier this go-round because there's more players down there that already have familiarity with the system. Speaking of pass catchers, Big Red was asked about two players in particular recovering from injury, with those being wide receiver Rashee Rice and tight end Jared Wiley. He said they're both doing well in their rehab and working to get back, but he doesn't have a timeline for their return or anything like that right now. Well, as a reminder, Rice had season-ending LCL surgery on his knee, injured it like week 3, week 4, right around there, so it was September, and then Jared Wiley tore his ACL back in November during practice. Well, Rice's injury happened early enough that if he doesn't start the season suspended, I don't know if he will or not, but he probably should be good to go as far as playing. That knee is going to be basically healed up and ready. I'm excited about that one. And Wiley, he might be back in time, but that ACL can take anywhere from 9 to 12 months to bounce back, and then you might not even look quite 100% out there, so he's more of a question mark to me at this point in time compared to Rashee Rice. Andy Reid also spoke about some of the offseason signings the team made, with one of the first being offensive tackle Jalen Moore. They liked him all the way back in college, and then he took full advantage of the limited opportunities he was given in San Francisco, because obviously he backed up one of the best left tackles to play the game in Trent Williams. So they were glad to be able to bring him into the offensive line, and I think he's going to be a good fit there. Speaking of the O-line, Andy said they liked Kingsley's potential to kick inside as a guard, if needs be, when they drafted him. So that was an interesting thing to hear. He's a very good athlete, and he did a great job Week 18 against Denver, and right now it's going to be Kingsley Suamataia and Mike Caliendo competing for that left guard spot. None of them are going to be playing at the level Joe Thuney was able to, but they're also going to be much, much cheaper. And who knows, maybe they add another guy in the draft to compete there as well. We shall see. Regarding the draft, though, Andy Reid shared with the team that them picking so late in these rounds, it forces them to kind of have to discipline themselves to just take the best player available. And a big way to do that is through free agency and have the roster in a pretty good spot. Well, they are very comfortable with the state of the roster heading into the draft later this week, and Andy even said that they would be ready to go right now if the draft took place on Monday rather than in a few days. He then shared about the signing of Christian Fulton, the cornerback addition to the secondary on defense. With Trent McDuffie being such a good inside player, Spags has some great ways they can use him in the slot, and the signing of cornerback Christian Fulton definitely will allow McDuffie to be able to move around more freely. He wasn't able to do that much at all last season, and I think it affected the defense quite a bit as a whole. The coverage wasn't as sticky. The pass rush was then not able to get home as effectively because you could throw the ball a lot quicker if you're the opposing team. You just kind of choose your matchup. Do you want to target Nick Bolton in the center of the field or maybe Chamari Connor in the slot? And because of that, the pass rush just didn't have as much of a juice as they did the year prior, and it was largely the same players along the line. So that's why I think kicking McDuffie inside is such a big deal. And McDuffie himself spoke to the media today, and he said during his exit interview after the Super Bowl, they talked to him about being able to move back inside for 2025 so he can blitz more and just kind of be used all over the place. Trent said, whatever you need me to do, I'm down. He just wants to help the defense continue playing at a high level. He then mentioned Justin Reid. He was asked about him, said he's going to miss the guy. He was a friend just like L'Jarius Sneed. He missed him when they traded him, but he believes in the safety room overall, from the players returning to the newly brought back Mike Edwards, and has full trust in them to hold things down behind him. Something on everyone's mind is his contract. Obviously, he could get extended this year. You could start negotiating with McDuffie as early as January. They could also pick up his fifth-year option and need to do that by May 1st. But more importantly, Veach said after they get Trey Smith's franchise tag situation worked out after the draft, they have till mid-July. The goal, obviously, with Trey Smith is to get a long-term deal done. They then want to pivot and focus their attention on George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie with the goal of keeping them around for years to come. Well, the highest paid corner in the NFL is making $30 million average per year, so Trent is probably going to get something at least in that ballpark. Meanwhile, the Chiefs haven't signed a defensive back they've drafted to a second contract since Eric Berry. In spite of that, McDuffie isn't bothered by all that. He just said he lets his agent deal with the contract stuff, and he's here to focus on football. If you play good football, the money will come, and regardless of what ends up happening, he said it's nothing but love for Kansas City. He loves the team and the community and would be ecstatic to play here for many years if it all works out. Well, I sure hope it works out, but let me know where you stand on this. Are you team pay Trent McDuffie because he's that valuable, or nah, Casey has been able to find solid corners repeatedly in the draft, so try that approach again and put the money elsewhere on defense or maybe even on offense. And then, while it's exciting to see players putting work in and getting ready for the next phase of OTAs, many fans around the league are obviously excited for mock drafts to be done and for the actual draft to take place starting this Thursday. I'm going to be live for night 1 and night 2 for sure, maybe day 3 as well. But I normally go live every year, react to the picks. We see them before they come in on air because Twitter/X has them first. Chiefs are trading up right now. The Bills let the Chiefs trade up again. So it's always fun to react and just kind of see how things play out and process through it together. If you want to hang out, I'll be there. With that being said, though, it'll be very intriguing to see how things play out for the Chiefs in the first round. Will offensive tackle out of Ohio State, Josh Simmons, actually be there at 31? That's who many around the league think that the Chiefs could be getting. Well, there's a pretty good chance that Simmons is not available at pick 31 because, according to multiple sources of Jonathan Jones, they have indicated Simmons' knee, quote, looks great upon medical rechecks. so he passes there. Well, that's part of the reason why Jonathan Jones kind of surprisingly had Simmons going 13th overall to the Dolphins in his most recent mock draft. Well, that's why the draft is so interesting to me. You never really know where some of these players could go and when they could get drafted. And while I think the Chiefs would love to try and snag a quality offensive lineman as early as humanly possible, that doesn't mean it's actually how things end up playing out. Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated thinks that if Simmons is within striking distance for the Chiefs, they will absolutely try to get him. He wouldn't be cleared to practice until after training camp starts, but that's fine with the Chiefs because right now they, in theory, have their starting left tackle in Jalen Moore and their starting right tackle in Jawan Taylor. Breer continues by saying, quote, "A lot of scouts and coaches believe Simmons has the best potential to become a top-shelf left tackle of any player in the draft." Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network said that if Simmons was healthy, he would have been a lock as a top 15 pick because talent-wise, there's no question that this guy has the ability to start in the NFL for a long time. Well, with Simmons' knee looking good in the medical evals of some of these teams, that means it could also be a green light for the Chiefs because they had him brought in for a top 30 visit and their training staff looked him over. So that's why everybody's mocking Josh Simmons to the Chiefs. And with Matt Miller of ESPN hearing there might be a real chance Casey at least tries to trade up in round 1, if Simmons is available, it's understandable why he would be a potential target to get a potential starting left tackle for the next 5-7 years at the end of round 1 is pretty rare to say the least. In order to do that, many believe KC would need to leapfrog the Rams and Texans, and the Vikings, who have pick 24 and only 4 picks in this year's draft, are prime trade candidates in the first round this year. Well, what happens if Josh Simmons and all the top offensive tackle prospects are gone? At least the offensive tackles Brett Veach and his guys had a true round 1 grade on. Could the Chiefs still try and trade up into round 1? Nate Taylor of The Athletic seems to think so because in his 7-round mock he put out today, he had the Chiefs trading up to pick 24 to go and get defensive end Mykel Williams out of Georgia. Depending on where you look, he's a top 3 to top 6 edge rusher in this year's draft. He's not even 21 years old yet, so very, very young. 6'5", 267 pounds, and a 2-year starter out of Georgia. Has the arms the length of an anaconda, says Dane Brugler. He's a Spags guy from a size perspective for sure, with a high-end motor that can not only quickly get to the quarterback, but he maintains gap discipline and doesn't often break contain, which is a definite benefit against the run. You could rotate him in year 1 to give guys like Charles Omenihu or George Karlaftis a snap or 2 of rest, and Joe Cullen would probably have a lot of fun teaching Mykel, who is still, again, very young and very moldable. He had 14 sacks in 3 seasons at Georgia with 3 forced fumbles the last 2 years and still had a pretty productive 2024 season in spite of a nagging ankle injury. I believe it was a grade 2 high ankle sprain that hindered him at times, but that production in spite of that is going to draw a lot of eyes on him in this year's draft. I do think both defensive end and defensive tackle is a need, so seeing an edge rusher get scooped up by KC in round 1 is not impossible. I mean, FAU is still a bit of a question mark as he enters year 3. Rooting for him. We saw some flashes at the end of the season, but need to see a lot more from him this season. Then George Karlaftis is on the last year of his rookie deal, unless they pick up his 5th-year option. They have until May 1st to do that. I hope they do. But then Omenihu, on top of all that, is on a 1-year prove-it deal. And if that wasn't enough, this is kind of an under-the-radar thing here, but Mike Dana's 3-year contract has an out after this season with very minimal financial repercussions. So yeah, a defensive end being drafted in round 1 is absolutely on the table. The defensive tackle class is deep enough that KC could opt to wait and get a guy in round 2 or maybe round 3. That's exactly what Nate Taylor does with his 3rd pick after the Chiefs selected wide receiver Trey Harris in round 2. I'll get to the D lineman selected 3rd in a moment, but the wide receiver that he selects is actually a guy I talked about in last week's video, and that is Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. He was a 2-year starter at Ole Miss and is coming off of 3 straight seasons right near the 1,000-yard mark. He led the team in 2023 in receiving, and despite missing 5 games in 2024 with a groin injury, he still recorded over 1,000 yards, averaging 128 yards a game, and racked up 25 touchdowns in his last 3 seasons. He's 6'2", 205 pounds with an explosive vertical and broad jump, and primarily lines up on the outside, which is exactly what Kansas City needs. He's a tough, physical receiver with great body control and is smooth in and out of his routes. He's not my favorite X-receiver of the bunch. I do like Jaden Higgins more personally, but Trey Harris has a much more likely chance to be there for the Chiefs at that pick. Speaking of outside receivers, the Chiefs recently had a virtual meeting with Colorado wide receiver Will Sheppard. He's played the majority of his college career out wide, and last year caught 48 passes for 621 yards and 6 touchdowns, only dropping 2 that were thrown his way. And get this, 17 of his 23 touchdowns the last 3 years in college happened in the red zone. So that's a sneaky, bigger body type target for the Chiefs at 6'3", 203 pounds that could be either a very late 7th round pick or he could possibly go undrafted, and the Chiefs try to get him after the draft. Anyway, if I get back to that 3rd pick from Nate Taylor's mock, he had KC selecting defensive tackle Alfred Collins out of Texas. Now, what's funny about this is the same 2nd and 3rd round pick that Dane Brugler made as well in his mock last week, so people definitely like the idea of both wide receiver Trey Harris and defensive tackle Alfred Collins to the Chiefs. Collins is a mammoth of a man, 6'6", 332 pounds, and in spite of being a bit of an older prospect for the Chiefs at 23 years old, he could still play a very valuable role in this defense. He's a run stuffer, a nose tackle who racked up a career-high 55 tackles in 16 games at Texas. The first year he was a full-time starter, and he also recorded 7 passes defensed. With KC signing the 33-year-old Mike Pennell to a 1-year deal, there's definitely nothing wrong with bringing in another guy like Alfred Collins who could rotate in year 1 and then play a bigger role 2026 and beyond. Whether or not they opt for a nose tackle like Collins or maybe more of a pass rushing threat in that range like Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, there are going to be some options there. Norman Lott led all FBS interior defensive linemen last year in pass rush win rate with a 12.6%, so he would be a lot of fun to have alongside Chris, the CEO of Sack Nation, Jones. Omar plays undisciplined at times, but the explosiveness is certainly there, and I really think the Chiefs could build upon that. I mean, the guy finished 2nd on his team in pressures despite being a rotational player. All in all, the potential what-ifs on who the Chiefs will be taking all ends this week. I certainly can't wait, and the fact that many teams around the league have less true round 1 grades on their draft boards, maybe an uptick though in late 2nd and 3rd round grades on players, the belief is the value is going to come rounds 2 through 4 rather than round 1 this year. That's perfect for the Chiefs because they have 4 top 100 picks in this year's draft, and that's definitely ideal for the way this draft class is looking at this point in time. Just please also get a dynamic running back in what should be one of the deepest running back classes in years at some point during this, and I would be a pretty happy camper, especially if they beef up the trenches and are also able to land an outside receiver. Let me know who you would like to see end up in KC by the end of the week, maybe your top 3 favorite players, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?